its many recurring crises. But the one area of work which did go on was the horror film genre. And Milton Subotsky, who was the producer and partner, he and his partner Max Rosenberg ran Amicus Films. Milton was a producer who was prepared to take a chance on young directors. So he figured that I might make a reasonable job of the film. And he got onto my agent, and so I went down to Shepperton Studios, and I met Milton Subotsky for the first time. I read the script, and I thought, this is fun. I think I could do something with this. I'd like to have a go at it. Subotsky particularly liked the multiple story format, of which this film is an example. And he made, I think, three or four films based on short stories of Robert Bloch.
He seemed to be a great chooser and organiser, and that he did it with warmth and personal interest. I know there were backstairs and backstage rows going on here and there, but there always is.
Without a good script you can't go anywhere, and Robert Bloch is a very clever writer of these sort of stories. But I just tried to bring something to it and enlarge certain areas of the picture. As a schoolboy, I grew up with films like the great Bela Lugosi Dracula movie and Boris Karloff's Frankenstein movies. I sort of grew up on these films, and I had great affection for them, and I had an affection for the genre. But that was one active branch of the film industry where you could get a chance, and it was way in, and I took it.
Since leaving the depressing confines of television, how many films have you made?
Well, actually, this is my second.
But your first horror film? Well, let me tell you, Mr. Talmadge, I have made hundreds of them.
It was a low-budget film made in a very short schedule, and it was difficult to do.
Look at the scenery. Look at it. Look. So flimsy you could blow peas through it.
One wasn't given the sort of large sets where you could do the sort of thing that Whale did in the Frankenstein movies, but as much as possible I did that. I wanted greys and greens and subdued colours. I didn't want any kind of brash primary colours at all. The actual house, of course, was an old lodge on the set at Shepperton Studios, and Tony put some Gothic elements on the outside of it to make it look a little bit more like Norman Bates' house in Psycho or something like that. I probably said also that we wanted a lot of Gothic props, you know, so we have all these book stands with eagles' heads and statuary and some bits and pieces that I was able to use in composing the frames. I was very keen on staircases because I thought, particularly in a horror movie, that playing drama on different levels within the frame was good. I like that, I've always liked that. So I said to Tony Curtis, the art director, we must have a big staircase on this set. And I used it, of course, in
Wait a minute.
I confess there are a number of in-jokes.
Any similarity between this model and that set is purely coincidental.
It's all we could afford on the budget.
And little bits of homage here and there.
That's what's wrong with the present-day horror films. There's no realism. Not like the old ones now, the great ones. Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera, Dracula. The one with Bela Lugosi, of course, not this new fella.
Dominic, the killer in the first story, was obviously inspired in a way by Karloff's Frankenstein's monster. And also the character played by Geoffrey Bayldon.
Now I should be able to rest in peace.
He was, in a sense, inspired by a very old and distinguished actor called Ernest Thesiger, who was in The Bride of Frankenstein.
Well, they got me very willingly.
When it comes to talking about cast, obviously, if a picture like this, a horror movie, gets because of its stars. Milton had already negotiated, I think, with Christopher and Peter and Ingrid Pitt as the three great stars of horror movies at that time. So they were, you know, part of the package, if you like. Ingrid was the queen of vampire ladies.
Peter Duffell was very nice. I don't think he hired me for the film, though.
She was a given thing with the film, but I mean, she was right for it. She wasn't considered for any of the other roles of the film. That was her role, and that was the one she took.
Tom Pertwee rang me because I knew him from Doctor Who, and he said, I want you to be in this film.
Goodbye, my dearest.
The rest of the casting was done by myself, obviously in consultation with Milton.
May I be of some assistance?
John had just finished Doctor Whoing, and I'd just finished the first lot of Catweasel. Can't we miss the fact that Catweasel meets Doctor Who, sort of from one channel to the other?
You are a celebrity. I beg your pardon?
Lovely man. Oh, a splendid actor.
You see, it isn't that I just star in horror pictures. I'm an expert on the whole subject. Ghosts, vampires, werewolves, witches, demons.
Tom Pertwee, who was Doctor Who, of course, a very famous Doctor Who. I think John did it beautifully and could not have done it better.
But I just loved my cloak. I just loved the whole story.
Please.
Welcome to the club.
When we'd shot the opening scene of the story, where Christopher comes into the house, looks around, and then calls his little daughter in, and she comes in the door behind him, this little figure. And then at the front of the screen, you have this very imposing 6'4" man who's great screen presence. And of course, your attention goes straight to this little girl.
You and your daughter would have no difficulties keeping it up.
No, I suppose not.
And after we'd seen the rushes, as we walked out, Christopher said to me, well, they always say, you know, you shouldn't work with children and animals. He was in a way, I suppose, quite right.
I think I was quite aware, though, that the focus was on my performance rather than his performance, in the way that the whole crew worked.
You know, you and I really should get acquainted. From now on, we'll be spending a lot of time together.
And I think that can be quite daunting for me, and possibly slightly annoying for him.
This would make a nice playroom.
Yeah.
It was interesting working with Christopher Lee as playing his daughter, because obviously his career was very well established by that point, and I was very new to the industry. He was quite a daunting person to be around. He kept his distance from me. I think that was partly because we weren't supposed to get on in the film, and so he didn't make a huge effort to establish a rapport with me, and then that meant that we could keep our distance on set.
Interesting role in which to cast Christopher Lee, actually, the role he plays in my film, that you know about him at that time, or what they expected from this actor who played Dracula. The fact he played these satanic evil roles in the Hammer films worked for our story in a very interesting way.
Give me that. Where did this come from?
You gave me permission to buy some toys.
Educational toys, Mrs. Norton. No, this.
Most of the story, you believe that he is the evil person in the story.
Getting the feeling that of her character being able to suss out that there was something not quite right for this child, and so for there to be a slight strangeness in my behaviour, in my way of relating, that could give that psychological effect to the film.
And in fact, of course, it's nothing of the sort. He is the injured party.
Jane! Jane!
I was the character that had killed him off. I'm not sure that I was any implications of her being a witch. I don't think occurred to me. I think it was a sort of childlike gleefulness that she got her own back from this very strict person who wouldn't allow her to play with toys.
There's one scene in the story where he sits there reading a book, which was Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I think Christopher's read it many times. He's a great fan of Tolkien. And he said, oh, well, I'll read my book. He sat there reading it. And of course, all these years afterwards, he is actually playing the leading role in these wonderful Lord of the Rings movies.
Peter Duffell was always very sweet and very charming. I remember one occasion, though, where his patience with me was tested slightly. There was a scene when we were coming down, I was coming down the stairs and Christopher Lee was coming up the stairs.
Only more kettles here. Where are the others?
And the end of the scene is that he slaps me across the face. And we worked towards, obviously, that point in the scene.
Where are they?
And I was more concerned about the hit across the face than I was about how he got down the stairs, because each time we had to play the whole scene. So I think I got slapped a number of times that day.
I mean, I had a lot of arguments with Milton, but they were always friendly. They had a tendency to be a bit hands-on in the cutting room, which a lot of producers are. You know, they get the director's material and they start mucking about.
There's something strange about it.
Listen, Sergeant, I'm interested in facts, not fantasies.
He was receptive of ideas if he felt they were good ones. There was also a sequence in the Peter Cushing story, which was not in the original script, for example, which meant a half-a-day shoot in a nightmare. Peter, the character he plays, goes through this wax museum. And that was not in the original script. That was totally my input. But Milton said, okay, fine, go and shoot it. If you can shoot it in the schedule, which we did.
We were encouraged to play around. And John's a very good inventor. And he's got a good sense of how far over the top you can go.
He brought something really marvellous to the film because he suggested that when he put the cloak on, he should actually fly. I think John had had some experience flying in pantomime at some stage in his long career. And this added a tremendous bonus.
Well, I think it's about time.
A serious thing at the end of the picture, at the end of the comedy sequence, where I felt that you could not go back to a sort of serious horror film situation when the detective inspector, played by John Bennett, goes down into the cellar of the house and finds the dead body of the actor. I wanted to do it with old silent film piano music going on and these shadows, these big shadows on the walls as the police inspector struggled with the vampire. Unfortunately, the film was shown to the distributors in an unfinished state, which is always a bad thing to do because they don't know what you're up to. And they took offence at this and said, oh, you can't do this for the horror movie. So it was cut down, and the point was it wasn't made unfunny, it was just made less funny. So far as the type of the film is concerned, I have to say that I was extremely unhappy with it.
Wardrobe mistresses, ineffectual art directors, no budget pictures. Curse of the bloodsuckers.
Else, I wanted to call the film Death and the Maiden, because in the Peter Cushing story, I had him playing on Schubert's Death and the Maiden. And as a title, it would have worked for every story.
I thought it was a wonderful title, especially as I was doing a comic number. It fitted us if it didn't fit the whole thing. It was a good scandalous title, yes. I certainly was.
I mean, this film did extraordinarily well. They did extraordinarily well.
I've had both reactions, quite a lot. I loved her because it was a comic one, and the reverse. I don't want comedy in a horror film.
The vampire must feast. But do you believe it?
Well, certainly in terms of it as a genre piece, it's a very mild film.
See, it's very rare that it's actually comedy, as opposed to it has a comic side.
I think the horror movie changed after that. An interesting thing is, of course, it's become a cult classic, this film.
It was a great film, and much better than things that have followed.
An old rhyme I remember from my childhood.